thought I was going to Tyler's family mansion for a cozy Christmas Eve dinner. Instead, his father Silas dropped a 50-page prenuptial agreement on the table and called me a gold digger in front of a room full of their wealthy friends. They included a poverty clause stating I'd leave the marriage with nothing but the clothes on my back. Tyler just stood there and told me to sign it to keep the peace. What they didn't know was that my family's investment firm owned the land their mansion sat on, held the primary lease on their company headquarters, and controlled the very bank funding their entire lifestyle. They were about to learn that real wealth doesn't announce itself. My name is Brooke Sterling, and I'm a 30-year-old architect. I'd spent my entire adult life building a career on my own merit, deliberately hiding the fact that I came from one of the oldest, wealthiest families in the country. I drove a modest car, lived in a simple apartment, and worked 60-hour weeks because I loved creating beautiful buildings, not because I needed the money. The invitation had said intimate family dinner, so I'd worn a simple black dress and brought a homemade pie, my grandmother's recipe. When Tyler picked me up, he was wearing a tuxedo, which should have been my first warning sign. "Why are you so dressed up?" I'd asked as we drove through the iron gates of his parents' estate. "My parents like things formal during the holidays," he'd said, not meeting my eyes. "It's just their way." But when we walked into the mansion, it wasn't intimate at all. The grand ballroom was filled with at least 50 people, all dressed in designer gowns and expensive suits. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead. A string quartet played in the corner. Waiters circulated with champagne and caviar. I felt immediately out of place in my department store dress, clutching my homemade pie like a security blanket. Several women looked me up and down with barely concealed disdain. I heard whispered comments. "Is that his girlfriend? She looks so ordinary. I heard she's an architect. How quaint." Tyler's father, Silas Monroe, stood at the center of the room like a king holding court. He was a large man with slicked-back hair and too many gold rings. His wife Beverly stood beside him, dripping in diamonds that were too large to be tasteful. "Tyler," Silas boomed when he saw us, "come here, son, and bring your guest." Guest, not girlfriend, not future daughter-in-law, guest. Silas didn't offer me a handshake or a greeting. Instead, he gestured to a servant who brought over a heavy leather folder. He dropped it on the table next to the elaborate place setting where I was apparently supposed to sit. "Before you eat our food," Silas announced, his voice loud enough that nearby conversations stopped, "we need to handle some business, Brooke." I looked at Tyler, confused. He was staring at his shoes. "Open it," Beverly said, her smile sharp and cold. My hands shook as I opened the folder. Inside was a document at least 50 pages long, with tabs and highlights and legal language I could barely process. But the title was clear enough. Prenuptial Agreement between Tyler Monroe and Brooke Sterling. "We've had our lawyers draw this up," Silas said, gesturing to a severe-looking man in the corner who I assumed was their attorney. "It's quite comprehensive, protects Tyler's interests, protects the family fortune. I'm sure you understand." I flipped through the pages, my vision blurring. One section was highlighted in bright yellow. The heading read, "Protection against opportunistic entities." Opportunistic entities, they meant me. "Section 7 is particularly important," Beverly added, leaning over my shoulder. Her perfume was overwhelming, expensive, and cloying. "It's what we call the poverty clause. In the event of divorce, you leave with exactly what you brought into the marriage, which, according to our research, is essentially nothing." Several people nearby laughed. I felt my face burn with humiliation. I read the highlighted section through tears. It described me as someone with no significant assets and limited earning potential, who represented a clear financial risk to the family estate. It stipulated that if Tyler and I divorced for any reason, I would receive no alimony, no property settlement, no access to any bank accounts or investments. I would literally leave with nothing but my personal clothing and belongings. I couldn't find words. "This is insulting." "It's business," Silas said coldly. "You're a lovely girl, I'm sure, but Tyler is my only son, and he's set to inherit everything I've built. I won't have some gold digger destroy his future just because she was smart enough to get her claws into him. I'm not a gold digger, I said, my voice shaking. I have my own career. I've never asked Tyler for money. Oh, please, Beverly said with a dismissive wave. You're an architect at some small firm. You drive a 10-year-old Honda. You live in a one-bedroom apartment in a middle-class neighborhood. We've done our research, dear. You're barely scraping by. And now you've happened to fall in love with a man whose family is worth $40 million. The timing is rather convenient. $40 million. They said it like it was an unimaginable fortune. Like they were royalty, and I was some peasant who should be grateful they were even speaking to me. I looked at Tyler again, desperately hoping he would say something, do something, defend me. But he just sipped his champagne and avoided my gaze. Tyler, I said quietly, are you going to let them talk to me like this? He finally looked at me, and what I saw in his eyes made my stomach drop. Not love, not even sympathy, just impatience. My parents just want to be safe, Brooke, Tyler said, his voice flat. They've worked hard for their money, and they have a right to protect it. If you really love me, you'll understand that. You'll just sign the prenup and we can move forward. It's not a big deal. Not a big deal. They were calling me a parasite in front of 50 strangers, and he thought it wasn't a big deal. I need to think about this, I said, standing up. My chair scraped loudly against the marble floor. I need some air. Sit down, Silas commanded. We're not done here. Yes, we are. I grabbed my purse and the pathetic homemade pie. I'm leaving. If you walk out that door without signing, Beverly said, her voice like ice, the wedding is off. Tyler will not marry someone who doesn't respect this family's wishes. I looked at Tyler one more time, giving him a final chance to be the man I thought he was, to stand up for me, to tell his parents they were wrong. He said nothing. So I walked out into the cold December night, my homemade pie still clutched in my hands, tears streaming down my face. Behind me, I could hear laughter and the tinkling of champagne glasses. The party continued as if I'd never been there at all. I drove home in a daze, barely seeing the road through my tears. When I finally got to my apartment, I sat in my car for a long time, trying to understand what had just happened. They thought I was poor. They thought I was desperate. They thought I was trying to marry Tyler for his family's $40 million. If they'd bothered to do actual research instead of just looking at my car and my apartment, they would have discovered something interesting about my last name. Sterling wasn't just a pretty surname. It was a legacy. My grandfather, William Sterling, had been one of the most successful land investors in American history. He'd bought property across the country during the Depression, when land was cheap and people were desperate. He'd held on to it for decades, watching as cities grew around his holdings. When he died, he'd left behind a trust worth over $3 billion. $3 billion, with a B. My father, Richard Sterling, had grown the family fortune even further through careful investments and strategic acquisitions. Sterling Holdings owned commercial real estate in every major city, held significant stakes in dozens of companies, and controlled one of the most respected private investment banks in the country. But my grandfather had taught me something important before he died. Real wealth is quiet. Loud money is usually temporary. I'd grown up in estate homes and private schools, but I'd also grown up watching my grandfather wear the same comfortable sweater for 20 years. Watching my father drive a practical sedan instead of a flashy sports car. Learning that true security came from building something meaningful, not from showing off how much you could spend. When I'd graduated from architecture school, my father had offered me a position at Sterling Holdings, overseeing our commercial property developments. It would have been a 6-figure salary to start, with an executive office and a company car. I turned it down. I wanted to prove I could make it on my own merit, not because of my last name. So I'd taken a job at a small architecture firm, started at the bottom, worked my way up through talent and dedication. I'd bought my modest apartment with money I'd earned myself. I drove my old Honda because it was reliable, and I didn't care about impressing anyone. I lived simply because I'd learned that happiness didn't come from things. And I'd fallen in love with Tyler Monroe because he'd seemed kind and genuine. He'd told me he loved that I wasn't impressed by money, that I valued substance over style. He'd said his parents' obsession with wealth and status embarrassed him, that he wanted something different. Apparently, that had all been a lie. On December 26th, I went into work despite it being the day after Christmas. My firm was mostly empty, most people were still on holiday, but I needed the distraction. I needed to think about buildings and blueprints instead of humiliation and heartbreak. My boss, Gerald Chen, was in his office working on a proposal. He looked surprised to see me. "Brooke, I thought you'd be celebrating with your fiance's family." "Change of plans," I said, not wanting to explain. "What are you working on?" "The Apex Tech headquarters project. Big commission. The client wants something flashy, all glass and steel, very modern. They're willing to spend whatever it takes." He paused. "Actually, isn't your fiance's father the CEO of Apex Tech?" My blood went cold. "Yes, Silas Monroe." "Small world. He's the one pushing for this project. Keeps calling to check on progress, wants everything perfect. Says money is no object." Gerald laughed. "Must be nice to have unlimited resources." After he left, I sat at my desk and pulled up the project files. Apex Tech was indeed our client. They wanted a new headquarters building, something that would announce their arrival as a major player in the tech industry. The estimated cost was over $200 million. Something about the numbers bothered me. I'd seen enough development projects to recognize when spending didn't match revenue. Apex Tech was a successful company, but not successful enough to casually spend $200 million on a vanity building. That evening, I did something I hadn't done in over 10 years. I called my father. "Brooke," his voice was warm, surprised. "This is unexpected. Is everything all right?" I told him everything. The Christmas Eve dinner, the prenup, the humiliation, Tyler's betrayal. My father listened in silence, and I could hear the anger building in his measured breathing. "I need to know something," I said when I finished. "Does Sterling Holdings have any connection to Apex Tech?" There was a long pause. "Why do you ask?" "Because they're spending money they shouldn't have, and I need to understand the full picture before I decide what to do next." Another pause, then, "I'll send you a file, secure server encrypted. Read it carefully, Brooke, and then call me back." The file arrived in my email 20 minutes later. I opened it with trembling hands. What I found made everything suddenly, terribly clear. Apex Tech didn't own their current headquarters building. They leased it from Sterling Properties, a subsidiary of my family's holdings. The lease was set to expire in 6 months, with a renewal rate that would triple their current payments. They didn't own the land their new headquarters would sit on either. That parcel was also owned by Sterling Properties. Silas had signed a 99-year lease at rates that seemed reasonable now, but would balloon significantly in year 5. And the loans funding their expansion. Those came from Sterling Private Bank, secured against both Apex Tech's assets and Silas's personal properties, including the mansion where they'd humiliated me. But here was the most interesting detail. Apex Tech had over $100 million in loans coming due on January 1st. Balloon payments they'd signed up for during their rapid expansion, thinking they'd be able to refinance when the time came. Except their company financials weren't strong enough to qualify for traditional refinancing. They were living on borrowed money and borrowed time, creating the appearance of massive wealth while actually being drowning in debt. The mansion, the cars, Beverly's diamonds, the elaborate Christmas party, all of it was leveraged to the hilt. My father's investment firm had been quietly buying up Apex Tech's debt from other lenders over the past 6 months. Not because Sterling Holdings needed another tech company. We had investments in dozens of more profitable ventures. But because my father made it his business to know everything about anyone who might become family. He'd seen this disaster coming long before I'd walked into that Christmas dinner. I called him back immediately. "They're bankrupt, aren't they?" "Not yet," my father said carefully. "But they will be if they can't make those January 1st payments. And given their current cash position, they can't. They've spent everything maintaining appearances. The prenup wasn't about protecting their fortune, I said slowly. It was about protecting what's left of it from being claimed by creditors. If Tyler married me and they went bankrupt, a divorce court might see through their shell games and I'd have a legal claim on their assets. Precisely. They need Tyler to marry someone with no resources and no legal knowledge, someone who would sign away all rights without understanding what they were really signing. My father's voice hardened. They saw you as perfect for that. An architect with a modest income, no family wealth to fall back on, naive enough to sign anything for love. I thought about Beverly's cruel smile, Silas's casual dismissal, the way they'd treated me like I was less than human, not worthy of basic respect. They'd been so busy looking down on me that they'd never thought to look up and see whose shadow they were standing in. On December 28th, Beverly called me. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won out. "Brooke, dear," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "I wanted to apologize for the other night. We came on a bit strong. You understand, of course, a mother protecting her son. But we do want you in the family. You make Tyler happy." I said nothing, waiting. "We'd love it if you could join us for a New Year's Day brunch. We'll have the prenup there, and Mr. Thorne, our attorney, can answer any questions you might have. We can make this work, dear. We can be a family." "Will there be photographers there too?" I asked coldly. "More society friends to witness my humiliation." "Of course not, just family, very intimate, very private." A pause. "Tyler misses you. He wants to make this right." "I'll be there," I said, "and I'll bring my own attorney." Beverly laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "An attorney? Dear, you can barely afford your rent. How are you going to pay for a lawyer?" "Don't worry about my finances, Beverly. I'll manage." After I hung up, I made another call. To Diana Vance, the most respected estate attorney in the country and a longtime friend of my family's. "Brooke Sterling," Diana said warmly. "I haven't heard from you in years. How's the architecture world treating you?" "I need your help," I said, "and I need you to make a very specific impression." New Year's Eve passed in a blur of preparation. Diana and I reviewed every document, every legal detail, every possible angle. My father sent over additional files, copies of the loan agreements, the lease contracts, the debt schedules. "They really have no idea who you are?" Diana asked at one point, sounding amazed. "They looked at my car and my apartment and decided they knew everything about me," I said. "They never looked deeper." "Their mistake." I spent the evening on my balcony watching fireworks explode over the city. In the distance, I could see the Apex Tech building lit up against the night sky. It would be beautiful, I thought, when Sterling Holdings took it over. We'd probably keep most of the employees. They weren't responsible for Silas's arrogance and poor business decisions. But Silas himself, Beverly, the people who'd laughed at me, mocked me, treated me like I was worthless. They were about to learn a very expensive lesson about assumptions. New Year's Day arrived cold and bright. I dressed carefully, not in an expensive designer outfit that would give away my resources, but in a simple, elegant suit that projected quiet confidence. And I wore one additional item, my grandfather's signet ring. The ring was heavy gold, engraved with the Sterling family crest, a lion holding a compass, symbolizing strength and direction. Grandfather had given it to me before he died, making me promise to wear it when I needed to remember who I was. I usually wore it on a chain around my neck, hidden under my clothes. Today, I put it on my right hand, with the crest turned inward, so it wasn't immediately visible. Diana picked me up in a town car. She was dressed impeccably in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary, though you'd have to know fashion to recognize it. "Ready?" she asked. More than ready. The brunch was being held at the Grandview Country Club, one of those exclusive establishments where memberships cost 6 figures, and the waiting list was years long. Silas and Beverly were already there when we arrived, holding court at a table by the windows overlooking the golf course. Mr. Thorne, their attorney, sat beside them. a sharp-featured man with cold eyes who radiated the kind of predatory confidence that came from years of bullying people in courtrooms. Tyler was there too, looking uncomfortable in his designer suit. When he saw me, he smiled nervously. I didn't smile back. "Brooke," Silas stood up, arms spread wide like we were old friends. "So glad you could make it. Happy New Year." His warmth was as fake as Beverly's apology had been. They needed me to sign that prenup. They needed their son married to someone powerless, someone who couldn't make claims on their assets when everything collapsed. "This is my legal counsel," I said, gesturing to Diana. Diana extended her hand professionally. "Diana Vance, estate planning and family law." Mr. Thorne's eyebrows rose slightly, though whether from recognition of Diana's name or surprise that I'd hired anyone at all, I couldn't tell. Silas just laughed. "You hired a lawyer? I hope you didn't spend your last dime on her, Brooke, though I suppose every bride deserves representation." He winked at Mr. Thorne. "Even if it won't change anything." We all sat down. A server immediately appeared with mimosas and an elaborate brunch spread. The table was laid with fine china and crystal that probably cost more than my monthly rent, or at least, what they thought was my monthly rent. "Let's get this over with," Silas said, pulling out the same leather folder from Christmas Eve. "Sign the prenup, and then we can talk about wedding dates. Beverly's been dying to start planning." The prenup was laid out on the table between the smoked salmon and the fresh fruit. 50 pages of legal language designed to strip me of any claim to the Monroe family wealth. "Before we proceed," Diana said calmly, "I'd like to review the document." For the next 20 minutes, Diana read through the prenup with professional precision, occasionally making notes on her legal pad. Mr. Thorne watched her with growing irritation. Silas kept checking his watch. Beverly picked at her food, shooting me venomous glances when she thought I wasn't looking. Tyler just sat there, saying nothing, being nothing. "This is quite comprehensive," Diana said finally, "though I do have some concerns about the enforceability of certain clauses." "It's perfectly enforceable," Mr. Thorne said sharply. "I've been practicing family law for 30 years. Everything in that document will hold up in court." "I'm sure it would," Diana agreed, "under normal circumstances." "What's that supposed to mean?" Silas demanded. Diana looked at me. I nodded slightly. "It means," Diana said, "that this prenuptial agreement is based on a fundamental misunderstanding of the parties' respective financial positions." "There's no misunderstanding," Beverly said coldly. "Brooke is an architect with modest means. Tyler is the heir to a $40 million fortune. The prenup reflects that reality." "Does it?" Diana pulled out her own folder, much thinner than the prenup but somehow more intimidating. "Let's talk about reality, shall we?" Mr. Thorne was watching Diana more carefully now. Something about her tone had changed, no longer deferential, now commanding. The air in the room shifted. "Apex Tech is facing significant financial challenges," Diana said calmly. "Over $100 million in loan obligations coming due today, in fact. Loans secured against both corporate and personal assets." Silas's face went red. "That's confidential financial information. How did you?" "It's public record for anyone who knows where to look," Diana interrupted. "As is the fact that Apex Tech's lease on their current headquarters expires in 6 months, with a renewal rate that will triple their occupancy costs, and that the land for their new headquarters is held on a 99-year lease with escalating terms." "So what?" Beverly snapped. "Every company has leases and loans. That's how business works." "Indeed," Diana agreed, "though most companies don't treat the people who hold those leases and loans with quite so much disrespect." I reached for my water glass, deliberately moving my right hand so that my grandfather's ring caught the light. The gold gleamed. The engraved crest, the lion holding the compass, was clearly visible. Mr. Thorne's eyes locked on the ring. His face went pale. "That symbol," he said, his voice suddenly hoarse, "that's the sterling crest." The table went completely silent. Even the string quartet in the corner seemed to quiet down. "Sterling," Silas repeated. What does that have to do with anything? But Mr. Thorne wasn't listening to him anymore. He was staring at me like I was a ghost. "Ms. Sterling," he asked, his voice cracking. "As in Sterling Holdings, the Sterling Trust." "Yes," I said simply. Mr. Thorne stood up abruptly, nearly knocking over his chair. "I apologize, Miss Sterling. I had no idea. If I had known who you were, I would never have drafted this insulting document." He was practically bowing. The transformation was instantaneous and complete, from predatory attorney to submissive supplicant in the span of seconds. "Will someone explain what the hell is going on?" Silas demanded. "Your prenuptial agreement," I said calmly, "was designed to protect your fortune from a gold digger. The only problem is you don't actually have a fortune. You have debt, massive debt, and I'm not the gold digger. You are." I pulled out my own folder and slid it across the table. "Sterling Holdings owns the land your mansion sits on. Sterling Properties holds the lease on your company headquarters and the lease on your new building site. Sterling Private Bank holds over $80 million of your corporate and personal debt. And as of midnight last night, when your balloon payments came due and you missed them, all of that debt went into default." Beverly's mimosa glass slipped from her hand and shattered on the table. Champagne and glass spread across the pristine white tablecloth. Nobody moved to clean it up. "That's impossible," Silas said, but his voice was weak. "We have investors, we have cash flow, You have appearances," I corrected. "You spent every dollar you had and every dollar you could borrow to look wealthy. The mansion, the cars, the parties, the jewelry, it's all leveraged. And now the bills are due." Mr. Thorne was frantically flipping through the documents I'd provided. His professional composure had completely shattered. "This is accurate," he said to Silas. "These are your actual loan agreements. The default clauses. Jesus Christ, Silas, why did you sign these terms?" "I was assured we could refinance," Silas said weakly. "The bank said." "The bank is owned by her family." Mr. Thorne's voice was rising. "Sterling Private Bank, it says it right here. How did you not know this?" "Because he didn't bother to research," I said. "Just like he didn't bother to research me. He saw what he wanted to see. He assumed that because I drive an old car and live modestly, I must be poor. He never considered that old money doesn't advertise itself." I turned my ring so they could all see the Sterling crest clearly. "My grandfather, William Sterling, built one of the most successful land investment portfolios in American history. My father, Richard Sterling, expanded it into a multi-billion-dollar trust. Sterling Holdings has assets across the country, including, apparently, every piece of property and debt your family depends on." Tyler was staring at me like I was a stranger. "You're rich, like actually rich." "My family has money," I corrected. "I choose not to live off it. I built my own career because I wanted to prove I could succeed on my own merit. That's called having principles, Tyler. You should look into it." $3 billion, Mr. Thorne said, reading from his phone. He'd clearly been Googling Sterling Holdings during my explanation. "The Sterling Family Trust is estimated at over $3 billion, and Apex Tech owes them. Oh my God." $80 million as of today, Diana confirmed. Plus penalties for late payment, which began accruing at midnight. Plus the balloon payment that came due, which was not made. Silas had gone from red to gray. He looked like he might be sick. "This is a mistake. There has to be a mistake." "The only mistake," I said, "was yours. You called me a gold digger. You mocked my car and my apartment. You treated me like I was worthless. You made me sign a poverty clause that assumed I had nothing to lose." I stood up, pushing back my chair. "But I'm not signing your prenup, and I'm not marrying your son, because I don't make business deals with people who don't respect me, and I definitely don't marry men who don't have the spine to defend me when I need it." I took off my engagement ring. The one Tyler had given me 6 months ago, the one he'd bragged cost $30,000, but I now knew he'd bought on a company credit card, and slid it across the table. "We're done, Tyler." "Wait," Beverly stood up, her composure finally cracking. "You can't do this. We can fix this. We didn't know who you were." "That's the problem," I said. "You only respect people when you know they have money. That's not character, that's cowardice. Please, Silas said, and the word sounded like it physically hurt him. Brooke, Miss Sterling, please, we can work something out. The loans, surely we can negotiate new terms. We've always paid on time before. Before you knew I existed, I corrected. Before you humiliated me at Christmas. Before you called me a parasite in front of 50 people. We made a mistake, Beverly pleaded. We'll apologize publicly, whatever you want. I looked at her tear-stained face, at Silas's desperate expression, at Mr. Thorne's professional horror. And I felt nothing. Not satisfaction, not revenge, just a cold, clear certainty that these were not my people and never had been. Deanna will be in touch with the terms for debt restructuring, I said. Sterling Holdings has no interest in destroying Apex Tech. We prefer profitable ongoing relationships to fire sales. Your employees don't deserve to lose their jobs because of your poor decisions. Thank you, Silas breathed. Thank you so much, Will. However, I continued, the personal guarantees you signed mean that if the corporate debt cannot be restructured, your personal assets will be seized. The mansion, the cars, Beverly's jewelry collection, all of it was pledged as collateral. You can't take our home, Beverly whispered. I can, I said, but I probably won't. Instead, you'll be paying rent to Sterling Properties for a house you thought you owned. Consider it a lesson in humility. I gathered my things, and Diana stood to join me. Tyler finally found his voice. Brooke, wait, I'm sorry, I should have defended you. I should have stood up to them. I looked at the man I'd thought I loved. He seemed smaller somehow, less substantial. You should have, I agreed. But you didn't. You let your parents call the woman you supposedly loved a gold digger and a parasite. You told me to just sign a document that would have left me with nothing. You showed me exactly who you are, Tyler, and I believe you now. I can change, he said desperately. I can be better. Maybe you can, but you'll have to prove it to someone else. Deanna and I walked out of the country club into the bright January afternoon. Behind us, I could hear Beverly sobbing and Silas arguing with Mr. Thorne about legal options they didn't have. That went well, Diana said as we reached the car. Did it? I felt exhausted suddenly, drained by the confrontation. You maintained your dignity, you protected your interests, and you taught some very arrogant people a valuable lesson. I'd call that a success. Over the next week, Sterling Holdings restructured Apex Tech's debt. My father's team worked with their accountants to create a payment plan that would allow the company to survive while ensuring the Monroe family learned to live within their actual means. The mansion they'd bragged about, they kept it, but now they were tenants paying market-rate rent to Sterling Properties. Their 3 luxury cars, sold, replaced with practical vehicles. Beverly's jewelry collection, most of it liquidated to pay down debt. The New Year's party budget, gone, redirected to employee retention and pension funding. Silas was removed as CEO and replaced with a professional management team appointed by Sterling Holdings. He remained on the board with limited authority, but the days of unchecked spending and ego-driven decisions were over. Tyler called me several times. I didn't answer. He sent emails, long apologetic messages about how he'd been weak, how his parents had controlled him his whole life, how he wanted another chance. I deleted them without responding. Some betrayals couldn't be fixed with apologies. My father flew out to meet me in early January. We had dinner at a quiet restaurant far from the social circles the Monroes traveled in. I'm proud of you, he said over wine. Not for the business outcome, anyone could have handled that, but for how you carried yourself. You didn't gloat. You didn't punish them beyond what justice required. You were sterling. I smiled at that. Being sterling meant more than having money. It meant having character, having principles, using power responsibly. Grandfather would have liked how you handled this, my father continued. He always said the true measure of a person is how they treat those they believe have no power. The Monroes failed that test spectacularly. They're not bad people, I said, surprising myself. They're just hollow. They've spent so long trying to look successful that they forgot to actually be successful. An important distinction. My father raised his glass. To real wealth, which has nothing to do with money. We clinked glasses and drank. In February, my architecture firm was offered a new project, designing the renovated Apex Tech headquarters. The budget had been slashed from $200 million to something more reasonable, and the design brief had changed from flashy and impressive to functional and sustainable. I loved it. For the first time in years, I was designing a building that would actually serve the people who worked in it, rather than serving someone's ego. Gerald Chen called me into his office when the contract came through. "Brooke, I have to ask, did you have anything to do with this? Sterling Holdings is now our primary contact, and they specifically requested you as lead architect." "I might have mentioned that I enjoyed the project," I said carefully. "Your father owns Sterling Holdings," Gerald said. It wasn't a question. "Yes. And you didn't think to mention this when you applied here 6 years ago." I wanted to succeed based on my own work, not my family name. But I never lied. I just didn't volunteer information that wasn't relevant. Gerald laughed, shaking his head. "You're one of the strangest people I've ever met, Brooke Sterling. Most people with your resources would be off sailing yachts and attending charity galas. Instead, you're here, working overtime on commercial developments." "This is where I'm happy," I said simply. "This is what I love." Spring arrived, bringing warm weather and new growth. I was standing on the construction site of the new Apex Tech headquarters, watching the foundation being poured, when I saw a familiar figure approaching. Tyler looked different, thinner, more worn. He was wearing jeans and a simple shirt instead of his usual designer clothes. "Hi," he said awkwardly. "Gerald told me you might be here. I hope it's okay that I came." "It's a construction site," I said. "It's open to authorized personnel." "I'm not authorized personnel. I quit Apex Tech. I'm working at a nonprofit now, teaching coding to underprivileged kids. It doesn't pay much, but," he shrugged, "it feels right." I studied him, looking for signs of manipulation or another angle, but he just seemed tired and genuine. "I'm not here to ask for another chance," he said. "I know I destroyed that. I'm here to say thank you." "For what?" "For not destroying my family. You could have. You had the legal right and the moral justification. Instead, you gave them a chance to rebuild with integrity. My father is actually learning to be a real CEO instead of just playing one. My mother is volunteering at a soup kitchen. They're becoming better people because you showed them they had to." He smiled sadly. "And you showed me that I'd been living my whole life trying to please people who didn't deserve it. I'm trying to be better too, trying to be someone who would have defended you. It's too late for us, but maybe not too late for me." I didn't know what to say to that, so I just nodded and turned back to watch the construction. After a moment, Tyler walked away. I didn't watch him go. The sun was setting over the city, painting the sky gold and pink. The new Apex Tech building would rise here, solid and practical and built on honest foundations. The Sterling family crest would be engraved in the cornerstone, not to brag, but to remind everyone who saw it that real strength comes from character, not from showing off. I'd lost a fiancé, but I'd found something more valuable, the certainty that I could stand on my own, that I didn't need anyone's validation or approval. That being true to myself was worth more than any ring or any title or any amount of money. The new year had begun with humiliation and heartbreak. It was ending with clarity and strength. And I was exactly where I was supposed to be.